Welcome to the Root of It All podcast with Tree, where you will learn new habits for human betterment. We talk about all things related to personal growth, and everything is on the table. Each episode will explore different topics like self-care, mindfulness, goal setting, and more, with a focus on practical tips and actionable advice you can start implementing in your life today. Our goal is to help you become the best version of yourself and live a more meaningful life. So grab a drink, cozy up, take your dog for a walk, or go for a drive. Join us for some fun and meaningful conversations with some amazing humans. Let's grow together.
Hello, everybody. So we're on another episode of The Root of It All with Tree, and today I am super excited to introduce Juliana to all of you. I had the pleasure of being on her podcast, which is awesome, and we can even put links in the show notes for everybody to
Yes.
follow your podcast as well. And so Juliana is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner.
Yes.
Okay. And it's cool. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but it actually says a lot, which is great because it really describes you. She's also the owner of Naturally Joyous, which we're going to learn about. And she is also the author of her book called Release, which is tells a story about her journey and things like that, which is amazing. So she's like, a triple hitter on, being a very profound professional, also
Oh,
a podcaster, a business owner, a author. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
oh, thank you so much. What a beautiful introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm very grateful to be here with you, Tree.
hmm And I'm excited to dive into a lot of these awesome themes that the people that listen to the podcast on my end and your end is going to find really interesting. So let's
Yeah.
just jump right in. So the first topic that I wanted to talk about is the because you talk about weight release versus weight loss. So
Yeah.
teach us a little bit about that.
Yes. And it's interesting because the whole sort of principle, the framework for weight release is something that has really evolved for me in the last 11 years now that I've been in this space working. I work primarily with women in their late 40s into their late 60s. That's really my demographic. And something that I have observed is that women are really hard on themselves. There's so much guilt and blame and self blame in weight loss. And very much like you, I have a deep passion for human behavior and understanding how our external world is dictated by the internal world. And I really wanted to bring that framework to the more traditional weight loss industry.
hmm
And that is very much how the weight release methodology came about, which is all about instead of spending time trying to externally get rid of parts of yourself, which a lot of times people are hoping to with the reduction in weight, we instead work within you first and then allow whatever is ready to be released to be released. And that is very much just like a framing instead of a diet or strategies, we put back the frame into you and how you feel and help you make choices that are empowering rather than just following plans and rules. So that's kind of how I see the distinction between the two.
hmm And I love that because it very much speaks to the actual human behavior. Because us as humans, every single
Yeah.
moment of every single day, we are in an emotional state, right? So
Yeah.
um, the truth is that we also can't unexperience things. So
Hmm.
that's the great thing when you're talking about weight release is that you're
Yeah.
actually letting go of the past. You're letting go of past experiences. Hey, are we going to forever forget? No, it can pop up from time to time, but it's awesome to have tools and techniques to be able to, whenever any emotion or anything at all, to be able to just, let it go in the moment if it pops back up, right? Because
Yeah.
life is messy,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, life is messy.
Exactly. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It's the richness of all experiences, right? Rather than making
Mm,
some good and some bad. And I was talking to somebody specifically about what I just said, because she asked me earlier this week, like, when you say release and letting go, what do you mean? And I think she was thinking in the sense of getting rid of it. Like you said, it's not about forgetting it, but it's about neutralizing that perception in our minds so that we take away the polarity or good or bad, right and wrong, and we neutralize it so we have more information and we can see benefits and drawbacks, blessings and difficulties, and give both sides equal amount of appreciation. And that's very much what we look to do with cravings and things like that, because excess weight is performing a job, right? Even if we don't want it, there's still something going on, often hidden and more subconscious, but it's performing a job of some kind. And for some women, it's very nuanced to what it is. And it's usually if you're like really stuck with plateaus and trying things or self-sabotaging, that's where we try to start and understanding what is a job. Well, how are you benefiting from your current situation? So we can address the root of that. And then, what happens afterwards is like a beautiful journey of working on the inside and seeing your external experience change.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting how much you and I align every time we talk. It's like because what you're talking about is what we do in hypnosis and neurolinguistics. We call that the
Yeah.
secondary benefit, right? There's
Oh, I
always a
love it.
yeah, there's a secondary benefit
Yes.
for negative behavior, right? Like
Yes.
even we help people to quit smoking or any kind of habit, and these are just
Mm-hmm.
symptoms, just like excess weight. Excess weight is a
Yeah.
symptom of what's happening. So it is really important that, and that actually goes into the next thing that we wanted to talk about is the that why diets don't work,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like changing all of these things, but it's not getting to the root cause.
Yeah.
Also, for us as humans to change so much in a very short period of time, our nervous system goes into almost overwhelm because
Yeah.
us as humans, we don't generally like change, right?
Yeah.
We build houses. Well, actually, I always have this tongue-in-cheek kind of saying that I tell everybody: us as humans were meant to be in community, but yet society says build a house and segregate yourself from your neighbors, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
how does that even make sense? And I'm sure,
Yeah.
and you can speak to this, is, a lot of some of the secondary benefit is people kind of hiding out, where the truth is that they need to go out into community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it is a big part of the work that I do that we've built a community of women, very much like-minded women going through the exact same struggles because it can feel really lonely, even if you can, chat with a spouse or a friend. I think it's a very personal journey, right? Especially the way that I approach it, which is the natural route and we do the inner work. So it's a very vulnerable journey in a sense as well. So really finding a community of other individuals that can reflect back to you that yes, this may feel tough, but the ones that are a little bit ahead can show you, yeah, but this is what you can look forward to has been a very, I'll say, very important part of the process. Right.
Hmm.
And to answer your question, like why diets don't work, I kind of think of it in three buckets. Like I'm very much like a framework. That's how my brain
Yeah,
operates.
yeah, I know,
Uh,
I know.
and in the sense of, I would say definitely what you approach is absolutely correct. The emotional aspect of the journey, right? Like what is really the problem behind the problem and what is really that whole emotional, entanglement going on. That's the one piece. I'll say the second piece is that, we are so wired to survive physiologically as well that our brains do not like when we lose weight. It's almost like you're going against this current, right? You want to, your whole physiology is designed for survival, not so much to fit into a size 4 pair of jeans. Uh, and a lot of times we see that the losing the weight isn't as difficult as the maintaining the weight. It's almost like climbing the mountain. A lot of people can, but it's the climbing down and maintaining it. After we lost, that's when a lot of women run into trouble. So there's a big part of understanding, how is like something I do in my work is say, how is fat fighting back? And once you understand the variety of mechanisms, you go, whoa, this is not about me not doing the right thing. There's a lot of counter forces that we need to be educated on so we can, you know, pick the right team, if that makes sense. And
Oh,
the
for
final piece,
sure.
I think it is necessary to be said that, we're in a world of ultra processed foods that overpower our satiety mechanisms, our eating appetite control systems, and it's adding tons and tons of toxicity in our bodies that some of us just can't handle. Like I'm one of those people, and we can talk more if we talk about DNA and stuff. I can share a little bit about myself on that sense. So when you put together the emotional bucket, of course, your brain fighting you for survival and staying the same, and the say quality of foods that we are exposed to on a regular basis, that makes it a very difficult picture for women just to go on a diet and lose weight.
Yeah, and so I want to loop back to a couple things that
Mhm.
you said just to speak to in terms of like a human behavior perspective. So, when you look at community and what you were saying about that, and also in our community as well, that all humans role model other humans, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we all see other humans and we look at it and be like, oh, I want to be like that, or I want to do that, or
Mhm.
I need to experience that. And of course, the journey is going to be completely different because it's unique to every
Yeah.
single individual. And the um, the great thing is that when people have those role models, it's easier to create the sustainability, to take off the
Yeah.
weight, keep the weight off, and to really be part of a community that supports that as well. So even with the Burlington Hypnosis Center, Business Growth Results, and even with Hypnosis Training Canada, we have all kinds of different communities within it. And the cool thing, and I want to get to the whole DNA thing in a moment because I think it's
Mhm.
fascinating. So, because when we talk about human behavior, DNA, it's like, and and that's the great thing about you and I. It's like yin and yang, because you're very like, I love, even, and I want to let people know too, even with podcasts, people listen to podcasts, they'll watch it. Whereas Juliana, you are so organized. Like you have a process for like me being a guest on your podcast. I was like, this is like you like the process and the system was
Oh,
fantastic. And
thank
then
you.
even to have you as a guest and you had, oh, well, this is this. And I'm like, huh, so I love the fact that that you have this process element and that it's, so I'm curious even to be a client, how that, because with yin and yang, that's awesome. And that
Mhm.
tells a lot of information and gives people sort of a platform. And the interesting thing for me, the yin yang, whatever, or yang yang, whatever you want to call it, but it's like the I come at it from a totally different perspective, which is
Yeah.
awesome. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm fascinated about what you do, and I'm excited that you're a guest here.
No.
And because it's almost like it's I don't have any processes. Like if I go in with a client and I put a process to it, then I know that I'm going to miss things. But with that
Mhm.
being said, you deal with mostly weight release, whereas
Yes.
I work with anything from habits, like I've had politicians come in with facial tics.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I've had kids come in with all different weird habits, and
Mhm.
to relationship issues, to business owners,
Yeah.
to multi-billion-dollar business owners that are doing mergers, and they want to know from a human behavior expert if
Mhm.
uh, the two families getting together will unite. So
Yeah.
my little rant here is is what's interesting that when you look at the micro or macro, that this DNA component, right? So you're
Yeah.
breaking down like to a DNA thing. So teach us about this DNA,
Mhm.
because even like I'm curious that when it comes to stuttering, facial tics, like smoking, like these things, if DNA also can teach something about
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely. And so I'll give like a little visual first and then we will get into it. So the way that I like to look at testing your DNA, because it is
Mhm.
something that does not change, right? So yes, we can influence our genetic potential, but the actual genes that you're given at birth don't change. So that's why I love using that as like a starting point of really understanding ourselves. And people are amazed by what it can actually tell you. So basically, mom and dad each gave you like this beautiful book, right? Like think of it as like an encyclopedia, if aging
Mhm.
myself a little bit here. So we put
I'm
them
with you.
mom,
I'm with you.
right? Like that was like my, yeah, before Google was a
Before
thing.
Google, yeah.
They have like your book from mom and book from dad, and those together kind of make up your genetics, right? And what we do is that like the test actually looks at all the pages and the paragraphs and the sentences, and we essentially look for very specific spelling errors. Like let's just say, like for like a little visual. Other genes we look for a paragraph that may be missing a whole sentence or a couple of sentences. That's sort of the gist of it on an analogy standpoint. What I do is that I look at your results from this very comprehensive test, and then we take that result, compare it to the person, and we see, okay, if this doesn't change, and these are some of the, let's just say, red flags, problem areas, and so on, how can we now overlap your choices, your food, your fitness, your sleep, as close as possible to what is most ideal for how you're built so that you can have the best possible expression of your genetic potential. So that's essentially big picture what we're trying to do.
Awesome. So it's
Mhm.
almost like you're sort of looking at the nutritional value of the human, right? So like you read the label and
Yeah.
you're like,
The user
oh,
manual, yes.
yeah, a user manual,
Yes.
and you can like change things out or say what's missing, and all of these things.
And
And
what I think
so,
mhm.
yeah, go ahead.
And what I think is really cool is that just because something is healthy, or at least label is healthy, like more, let's just say from a food or detox standpoint, it may actually not be healthy for you. And I think that is what is cool because we can actually get to that level of nuance, right? So I can give you specific examples if you want, but in general, we look at nutrition, we look at fitness, sleep, detox, hormones, cardiovascular health, as well as mood and behavior, which I think is probably the most interesting aspect that we can maybe go into more detail. And then we can actually see from how you're wired, even, from supplements, from foods, from types of fat and carbs, like how are you actually built and what are the foods and decisions that are actually going to support that person further, not just for weight loss, but very much looking at for optimizing your health, which also includes weight management.
Mhm. And so,
Yeah.
what would be the top three things that you would constantly see? Or do
Um,
you have a top three?
so the test is enormous, right? So I group
Yeah.
it in buckets, but maybe I'll focus on the mood and behavior section to answer that because I think would be most relevant to what you do. One of the major things that we look at is an individual's ability to feel and experience pleasure. So your DNA, like how it impacts weight besides nutrition, it's a lot
Mhm.
in terms of satiety, behavior, reward seeking, pleasure seeking behaviors. And it may also play out in things like smoking and other things you were mentioning before. So what we do is that we look at the pleasure response broken down into three pieces: the anticipation phase, right? When oh, there's going to be chocolate cake, right? And there's that, initial, the moment the cake hits your tongue. So the actual pleasure response and how quickly we actually release dopamine from receptors and you let go of the pleasure. So I'll give myself as an example.
Mhm.
I am someone that feels very deeply. So I have a lot of dopamine receptors and I don't want to let it go. Like mine stays stuck and then it goes. What this means, like with this genetic pattern, is that I have high tendencies for binge behavior, anywhere from drinking. And yesterday was my 2 years of a
Oh,
hundred
I
percent
saw
alcohol
that.
free.
Yes,
Yes.
congratulations. Awesome.
Thank you. Because I recognize by testing my DNA that, it is a very difficult thing for me to moderate behavior. So things that I really want to moderate, I do have to go into more abstinence. And I do that from, different reasons, not just health.
Mhm.
But anyways, so in my case, because I get stuck, I may go from many days, nothing. And then if I find like a really good show on Netflix, for me to say, okay, it's bedtime, let's stop, it is so hard because I just want to binge the whole show. So that goes for eating, shopping, drinking, all sorts of behaviors. Whereas on
And
the
you can,
others, mhm,
sorry, so you can tell these things from the DNA.
exactly. We can tell
Wow.
how
Okay.
powerful is your binding to dopamine and how quickly it is the release. Because if somebody on the opposite end of the spectrum and they have very little receptors, so they don't feel a lot of pleasure, and it gets released really quickly, that is more what we see for the addictive personalities. You need the next hit and the next, like the adrenaline junkies, the high risk takers, because they need more and more and more sources of, dopamine because it's so short lived for them. So we can look and map your reward system through testing your DNA. Yeah.
That's very cool. I mean,
Hmm.
um, we have like in hypnosis and neurolinguistics, we have a lot of like um, what we call meta models or human tendencies, different things like
Yeah.
that. So even by just how a person operates, we can kind of tell those sort of things. But how cool with the DNA that you can actually like pinpoint that
Yeah.
thing for like that's pretty wild. Like to because
It
I know you
really
have a
is.
science background and I
Mhm.
like again yin and yang. You have a science background and I have like a massive like creative background. So it's very interesting to learn some of the sciences behind certain meta models that were created, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah. And so one of the other things that I wanted to chat with you about is about regaining self-worth.
Mhm.
So would you say like it's interesting how, with I see thousands of people a year that I work with,
Mhm.
and there's lots of themes from whether it's from society, whether it's from just things that are going on in the world, environment as well.
Yeah.
So environmental things and certain things shift. So through a word, I mean, I don't even want to use the C word, COVID, right?
Yes.
but but there's a lot of relationships that got destroyed
Mhm.
or um, sort of got poked at in not the right way. So there's lots of repairing and healing happening right now, which is
Yeah.
awesome. And it's getting people to learn lots of tools. So this whole self-worth thing is part of
Mhm.
this. So teach me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. It's one of my favorite topics, and I have a framework for looking at it that for me is very freeing. And the way that I look at it is if you think of a X and a Y axis, like back to math class, I guess, to plot a
Again,
curve.
science.
Let's go all the way back. No, I'm kidding. So on the X axis, so your horizontal line is what I like to plot as self-worth, and right in the middle of your vertical line, which is your self-esteem. So I like to compare the two because with 100% conviction that no matter who you are, what you do, or don't do, your self worth is always 100%. It is very much the moment you're born, that is just your birthright and nobody can touch it.
Yeah.
What changes is our often is referred to as self-esteem. And people confuse the two because your perception of how you look at yourself has no real impact in the fact that you are ingrainedly worthy. And I think that is a frame that has really helped me. So if I feel less worthy or more worthy, maybe, full of pride or, down full of blame and shame and those things, I know I can regulate and course correct and neutralize perceptions because my self-worth is intact because nothing can actually impact or interfere with it. So that's like the first layer of how I like to look at it.
Hmm. And it's so interesting that just the wordings that so for us, we have something similar and it's called ego high, ego low. And we
Mm,
want to see people
yeah.
be ego neutral,
Hmm.
right? So
That's
that's
exactly it. The
right.
neutrality is where you can perceive
Hmm.
your worth with the most accuracy. So you're not proud and boastful and you're not, blaming yourself and guilty.
Hmm.
And it's very much neutrality is a word I use as well to really look at this equilibrated state of mind that you can see pros and cons in equal proportion and really tap into this perfection of life, which
Hmm.
we are part of, right?
Absolutely. And it's interesting the word perfection. Like a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
that, and I'm sure
Yes.
for you, lots of humans, they get fixated with the perfection thing, right? Like what
Yeah,
is perfect? But the truth is, and just to piggyback on what you were saying, is we're all already in our own perfection, right?
exactly.
Perfection is really what we choose to believe at any given point. And it's better to know that you're already within perfection as opposed to trying to seek it out. And so
Yes.
yeah, so when we're
Yes.
when we're ego neutral, or we know that we have the right amount of self-worth and um, the way that we view ourselves, or even view the world around us as well. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people can get so down, or have unuseful thoughts in terms of society and the world around us.
Yeah.
Some people, they can even live their life as if, they're a victim of the world around them, which
Hmm.
is certainly not the case, right?
Yeah. And I think it is like a important part of the journey, right? That I think we almost like start in this victim place that we believe that, you know, I think that specific expression is when we forget how powerful and in control we actually are. And I think what I love about looking at human behavior in those frameworks is that it takes a lot of the story and it pauses it. It's like, okay, that's fine. We can revisit later.
Yeah,
And really coming back, like you said, because I use the word perfection with a lot of intentionality behind it, truly meaning very much like what you said, that there's actually nothing to change, nothing to shift. It's only releasing the misperception so that we can come back to what is already present. And, somebody that I love, something she said, Byron Katie, and her work is quite mainstream now. And she says, there's no fighting reality, which a lot of times is what happens when we are in our stories. It's absolutely crazy, right? And she says, you can either be right or you can, and I was freedom every time. Right. So it's all how to come back. If I feel a victim, I look, okay, what about these other situations that are reflecting a part of me I don't fully love yet? If I'm really proud of myself, I say, okay, what are they reflecting that I'm maybe a little bit too, poofed out about? And keep neutralizing as we go through the day. Life becomes so much easier because it's not you against the world anymore. It's you experiencing life, and almost like this adventure and the flavors and even difficult emotions. They have so much blessings hidden. Like I say, it's like wrapped in newspaper, but it's still a gift inside, and tapping into that and using that as a way to regain health rather than just, adding more and more band-aids, right? Which is usually the strategies when we see the more traditional weight loss and all those things out there. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and it's almost like there's a band-aid for everything. I got into a conversation with another, actually a couple health practitioners. It was a gym owner and a holistic nutritionist. And we were
Mhm.
talking about, is it Ozempic? Am I right?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
and it's what is going on in terms of this, like people looking for the band-aid. I don't know about
Yeah.
you, but I get a lot of clients that have tried it or experienced it, gone through all the side effects, didn't lose any weight, and then they're still right back where they started.
Yeah. And I
So
think even from what the work you do, what is really interesting, that was what I was teaching last night about. Like, I've been teaching them a lot because that's what people have been asking me for.
Mhm.
And something that's really interesting that, yes, we talk about those medications in terms of how it impacts the gut, but the same receptors, the GLP-1 antagonists, are also in the brain. And and I know the brain is very complex, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
even the mechanisms of action of how medications such as Ozempic is impacting the brain, there's no consensus yet on the scientific community. There are different theories, and some of those receptors are in areas that control mood, that control memory. So, what is really the long term consequences, right? Or somebody, you know, let's just say, for example, somebody more on the depression aspect of things, that they are using food as maybe a temporary coping mechanism as they're working on the deeper stuff. Now they can't eat those foods anymore because of the medication. Like, what happens then when that strategy gets removed abruptly? So there's all those aspects of it and how it impacts brain and mental health that I think we're still going to be uncovering, that I find to be a little bit, you know, scary, right? Like, because we don't have like the full clarity just yet in that specific area. So absolutely, like, I'm, you know, we both are seeing this more and more, right? And
Mhm.
it is important that people put everything on the table so they're very clear about drawbacks and benefits before they
Mhm.
make that decision.
Well, and the interesting thing is too, is that when you look at how many books there are written about the brain from, neurological doctors
Yeah.
or super highly educated humans that have been studying the brain, the function, the nervous system, all of these things, but yet these are all just concepts still. Because as soon as somebody is
Hmm.
seeking out information or doing all the research and years go by, it'll take years to write a book, years to do the research, and then at the same time somebody else is researching something else that contradicts
Yeah.
even that what that is. So
Yeah.
yeah, so what is the truth? It's so important that we are looking after ourselves, making sure that we're bringing our body to its natural thin and fit state, right? That's
Yeah.
naturally how we are as human beings, and that you're getting the help that you need. So anybody listening to this, I encourage you to reach out to Juliana if you need
Hmm.
to release something specific. Um, but so is there anything else that you want to add or to teach people or to just leave a quote or whatever else?
Hmm. Yeah, I think I usually like to close by saying that I do believe, and that's very much what my book is about, the fact that your body is your best friend, even if it doesn't look like it necessarily
Or
from,
feel
you
like
know,
it in the
or
moment.
feel like it,
Yeah.
I come to you with spinal surgery, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue diagnosis, 3 autoimmune diagnoses, and the list goes on.
Yeah.
15 plus years of
You've been
chronic
through it
pain and
all.
migraine, so much. But all of those things were such necessary sort of roadblocks almost to get me back to authenticity, to get me to where I am today. And I was actually able over the years to actually develop actual transcendental gratitude for the events and see my own perfection to the parts that looked broken, right? I released, since optimizing my DNA, the last 30 pounds of weight that I've been, trying for a while, even though I was eating healthy with all this knowledge. So I've seen that the more I have learned to support my body in its best possible way, very much simple ways. Not, I don't do almost any supplements. Like I take vitamin D, that's it. Everything else is food based, it's good sleep, yoga, like things like that, because that's what my DNA needs, right? Different people are different, as well as being really, I'd say, dedicated to doing the inner work on myself and clean my side of the street to see my health now and what I can do and things I can face versus like 20 years ago when I was on tons of supplements and tons of medication and all those things, it's night and day, right? So I hope that this gives people hope. And my DNA has lots of red flags. Don't get me wrong, lots of red flags. And it's still because everything can be managed, right? So I think what I've done is really get certainty of what it is, do the inner work, which I know we do amazing work with through hypnotherapy with individuals, get into the root cause as well, and get into a place that life is easier because I'm no longer fighting life. I'm no longer fighting my body. I'm just going with the flow, growing, experiencing, and just, I don't know, engaging with the challenge. I think that is really something I love to close with. If you engage in the challenge, life supports you, right?
Absolutely. And that's a good way to say it, that people are fighting it, right? And
Yeah.
once they're seeing a different way and learning different ways and how to interact with themselves and having enough experiences of what is working for them, right? So for you,
Yes.
as you're going through all those things, you had enough proof and experience that yes, this makes me feel good, like in terms of you, right?
Yeah.
Where and more people need that, not only for weight loss but also in relationships, right? To have enough proof that they can be loved, or they can love, or they can have deep connections with human beings and
Yeah.
not get hurt, right? Lots of people think
Yeah.
that they're um, a victim, or that they're being hurt, or that they're being um, treated in a certain way where what you can change the way that you're looking at things, right? Like
Hmm.
I do with a
Yeah.
lot of husbands and wives, and sometimes the wife is like, oh well, he said this or he said that. Well, it's actually him being vulnerable, as opposed
Mhm.
to the woman is like, oh, I better do this or I better do that because he said this, or even vice versa. Sometimes I have a lot of male clients that it's the same thing. Well, she said this, she said that, so I need to do this, where it's just her venting and nothing needs to be done, right?
Mhm.
So it's more about
Yeah.
being in the moment and experiencing. So just as you experienced what feels good for you, it's the same with all human beings. They need to have that experience to whatever it is that needs to change, to view it another way, be patient enough to allow the experience to unfold as well. So even with all the changes
Yeah.
that you've been making, it's not like, well, I'll do this for a day and let's see what happens.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like if that's the expectation, oh my gosh, if things
Yes.
happen that quickly, then you know, man,
Yeah.
but life isn't like that, right? Life
Yeah.
is really about that slower process. And we do say slower, but it's also a richness. It's the richness of
Yes.
life itself,
I
right?
think the slowness is almost in terms of the pace in which we are able to appreciate the details rather than just like running like crazy. But I also feel like what you said about expectation, it's something that I contemplate often. Expectations versus appreciation, right? So I'll give a quick example. Hopefully we have time.
Yeah, we
So
do. We do.
okay.
It's good. Yeah, yeah.
So I've been with my husband for almost 20 years. And I would say maybe like 8-ish years ago, because I'm not great with time for some reason. It gets complicated
That's
in my head.
okay.
Let's say about 80 years ago. I had
Yeah.
like a major, it was a very big deciding, like turning point in that relationship. Because before then, it was around the time that I left corporate and I had a much more, I would say, like masculine energy to me of how I ran things, right? Like running a department. It was like a very, very
Yeah.
crazy lifestyle, a lot of traveling and things like that. And at that point, up until that point, I think I really expected things from him that he couldn't meet because I almost wanted him to be like a version of me, but in male form, right? Like with ambition, with goals and things like that. And he is a softer person. I'm like the really tough one in the relationship. He's a softer
Yes.
person,
Yep.
and his role is support, right? So I had this blessing in front of me in my hands, and I just couldn't appreciate because I expected things from him that were unrealistic to who he was. And I
Yeah.
had like this major healing crisis. It was a big moment in my life, and then
That's
I
awesome.
could see it clearly. I remember like I think I apologized and cried for like 4 days, something I've never done before. It just like it took me over and I was like, wow, like how could I have been so blind? But I was not able to see before. And from that specific event when I had this epiphany and this clarity to what our relationship is now, we developed such respect for each other being exactly who we are. And we do the same in our work and do with weight release with our relationship. And we're able to tackle literally any problem confrontation in minutes rather than hours or days like before, because we don't get stuck in the story, the victim anymore. We're very objective. What is the problem behind the problem? What are we actually upset about? This is how I feel. This is how I feel. We put on the table, we clarify, and that's it. And it sounds simple, but it took us 20 years getting here, right? Or 15 years getting here. But it's unbelievable. We clean each other's side of the street, right?
Mhm.
I take full responsibility for myself. He does the same. And it is a beautiful thing. But what has changed is that I stopped expecting him to behave like what I would like and learn
Mhm.
to appreciate who he actually is. And I think that is such an important, beautiful shift that we can do in any area of life: finances, career, relationships,
Mhm.
weight, health. So that is something I wanted to insert in there as well.
Yeah, thank you for that example. And I'm absolutely, and I want to expand that out because I know a lot of people listening, because I work with corporate as well. So that exact analogy. So a couple things, male, female energy. A lot of females can carry a male energy, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of males can carry female energy.
Mhm.
So even so say business owners, so I have a lot of clients that are men that own businesses and they hold a lot of female energy, and then they have their CFO, CEO underneath them, that they carry they're female and they carry male dominant energy.
Yeah.
So even with certain people, they may have transference for the opposite sex, even though they carry these sort of energies within them. So
Right.
on personal relationships, a husband and wife, or even same-sex marriages too,
Mhm.
even best friends, sisters, brothers, and all of these things. It's just because you are a certain sex with your uh, body parts that say that
Yes.
society says you
Yes.
are a female or a male, but what's right, what's wrong in this society, I think it's freedom of whatever you want to be.
Yeah.
But also too, it's important that people can be flexible enough, just like your description with you and your husband, that you can, and I love that analogy, clean your side of the street,
Yeah.
right? Be a good neighbor, right?
Yes. 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 Love
Yeah,
how it
be a good
ties.
neighbor, clean
Yeah.
your side of the street. I love it, right?
Yes.
Which for corporate, you have not just two people, but there could be anywhere from 10 to 500.
Ah,
So
absolutely.
everybody clean their side of the street and really communicated in this kind of way and respected and could be flexible enough to maybe even step into another role. Also, lastly, to what it was that you were saying, to understand that if you're perceiving or you have a perception that the people that you work with or that you operate around or that's in your orbit is going to operate the way that you believe that they're going to operate, life's messy. That will never happen
Mhm. Yeah.
because, yeah, that will never happen. So it's really about flexibility within yourself and flexibility within the expectations that you have, and communicate, ask, say, hey, teach me about your belief of what this is, right?
Yeah.
If you're and you're either cohabitating with your partner or sibling, parent, whatever it is, or if you're in the office every single day, you're actually cohabitating with all the people that you work with.
Yeah.
So it's very cool. I want to just kind of loop back. We started this conversation with the difference between weight loss and weight release. Well, you change the word weight and just put humans,
Yeah.
right? Human,
Yeah.
human emotions. So human emotion, losing it, letting it go, or releasing it.
Mhm.
Okay. And
Yeah.
I think the even it's we start off with weight, but I really believe that it's an overall, and that can be layered over top when we talk about release or loss, right? When we talk about
Yeah.
loss, it's almost like a grieving, but when you're
Exactly.
releasing it, you're letting it go. So
Yes.
yeah, so put
And releasing
simply,
is a choice. It's an
yes,
empowered choice, right?
yeah, and the loss is like someone's feeling like a victim.
Yeah. Yes. Even
Yeah.
like what the word, the meaning of the word that we've have for other areas of life that carries on right into if you think of that word in a different context, I think that is very much like the release being this like freer, lighter. That's what women say. Like, I love the term. Like it just feels something that's possible versus
Mhm.
something that there's so much grief, like I said, attached to it, which is, as we know, losing in all stances. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because in like in the clinic, one of the big things that we teach every client that comes in there is about options, right? Because us as humans,
Yeah.
if we don't have options, we get bored. If
Yeah.
we're bored, we're not stimulated. If we're not stimulated, we're acting out, right?
Yes.
So so yeah, so when we release, we're actually giving ourselves more options.
Mm-hmm.
If we're allowing ourselves to stay stuck in loss, then we're staying in unuseful emotions, right? We're
Yeah.
staying in this sort of ego low, or I forget the terminology that you called it,
Yeah.
where we're keeping ego neutral. But
Yeah.
yeah, us as humans, we are fascinating. Like and I know that you love your job just as much as I do, just
Yes.
because every human that you work with is completely different, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, go ahead.
But you know what is really interesting? we're all so different and unique, but at the very core, and maybe it is because I'm in such a specific niche, right? Within like not just the weight industry, but also women in their 40s to 60s wanting to do this naturally. So there's a very specificity there. But I feel, and maybe that's how I see people, I don't know, but I see such a consistency in the essence of everyone. It's all these individuals, very beautiful, powerful women that give to the world. And for some reason, they can't see their brilliance. They can't recognize their worth or their capacities. And it's so easy for me to see it. I look at them, it's like, how can you not see how incredible you are? And they
Hmm.
can't, right? Because there is all this unlearning, I think that's necessary for them to do. And they give so much because it's part of their identity, right? Or caretakers or being very busy. That
Absolutely.
is very much how they praise themselves. So I find it fascinating because it's almost like the same blueprint, but everybody's gift is wrapped a little bit differently. Yes.
Well, and to your point, to extend onto that, it's like the universe is slapping them in the face, telling them how awesome they are, but they have all these
Mhm.
blinders on of like, oh, I must help this
Yes.
person. I must do this before I look after myself. It's like they're a knight in shining armor and they have to ride off into their with their white horse, saving everybody.
Yes.
Meanwhile, there's no reason why they need to save anybody but themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? But I think we've been told so many things, and there's so much ingrained knowledge that we believe that that is when we get there, that's when we feel better. Like there's absolutely no, um, like nobody promotes the now moment, right? Maybe the
Right.
gurus of enlightenment, sure, but like
But
everything
but
is when you get there, when you do this, when
but
there's
where
a lot
is
of
there?
future
Like,
pacing, right?
yeah, but
Where
where is there? Like, there's no such
exactly,
thing as I have arrived. Where have you arrived to? There's always
right?
more, right?
And I think something not to just get in a tangent here, but like something that we've been hearing more about some of the women say losing weight very fast in the weight loss medication is
Mhm.
that they're not addressing that emotional. There's no gradual, inner work, right? Because it's very, very fast and quickly for some that do get the results. And then there's this emotional gap that they don't feel happier because the weight itself, like I said, is a symptom and it's not the root of the unhappiness. So even when they get the body, but emotionally they're no different. They can't even experience the confidence that they were hoping for, the all the blessings that they thought was in that future sense. So I always say, can we discover what you actually are after? Like, what is the feeling that you want? That's how I start my book. And once you know what the feeling you're after that you think you're going to feel after the weight is released, can we learn to find other ways to feel it now so you don't have to wait? And then we do the process of getting your body and your physiology to catch up to you, right? Rather than waiting for the future that may never come. Why not do it now? Right. And then, the journey becomes so much easier. It's almost like flipping what we're actually trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and that's also sort of in hypnosis. It's part of like the imagery that we create or that um, people learn how to do by themselves. And it's true.
Mhm.
Even you look at the way that us as humans do anything at all, we create the vision, right? So even if it's building a house, you have to
Mhm.
visualize it first and you're
Yeah.
fantasizing your way through, right? So think about when you first start dating, you're already in this fantasy of how you believe that it's going to
Yes.
be. So why not put that same analogy to your point, and I'm
Yeah.
collaborating on your point here, that
Yes.
yeah, like fantasize about how it is that you're going to be now. Like be there in your mind, be there in your body, and so yeah, and be there first because then it's easier to get there. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly.
It's like embodying what you want, and that helps you become the one that can. Like that's kind of like the wording that I like to use. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. 100%. Well, well, I have taken up so much of your time. Thank
Oh
you so much for coming here. I know I said I'd only have you for like 25 minutes and we've been almost an hour. So so it's always a
no.
pleasure and you
Yeah.
and I we get into these amazing conversations which is just it's awesome and I know everybody listening to this is going to learn so much. just through listening to this and applying it to their own transformation, applying some of the things that they've learned here to their journey and
Yeah.
being in the moment and all of these things. So thank you so much. And I'm going to have all of Juliana's information in the show notes and links and all this stuff. You can connect with her, get a DNA test and stuff like that. Yeah, awesome. So thank you so much.
Yes. My pleasure. Has been such an honor to be here on your show and always love our conversations.
Me as well. Me as well.
Well, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode of The Root of It All with Tree. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. But before we go, I just wanted to remind you that you can follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram. And we will be posting motivational quotes and behind the scenes content that you won't want to miss. You can always sign up to come live while we're filming this, or even join us online through Zoom. We always offer open question and answer after each episode that we don't record, so it's all private, but you can get more involved. So sign up for free at businessgrowthresults.com, and we're going to cover all kinds of different topics that you're not going to want to miss. And if you're looking for that one-on-one guidance or help, be sure to book a free screening. You can do that at burlingtonhypnosis.ca or call 905-634-4777. And finally, you can catch our podcast on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. So be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. Thanks for listening.